Welcome to the Best Family on the Block podcast, where a mother and her two daughters talk about love, life, and everything in between. Parenting Autism with special guest, Gina Moretto. Hi, Gina.
Hello. Hey. So glad you could join us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to start off our podcast like we've been starting off every week with different recommendations. And Morgan, you want to do your recommendation first?
Yes. So this week I decided to make cookies for just because I was bored and wanted to bake, and I didn't want to eat all of them by myself, so I took them to work with me. But they are brown butter chocolate chip cookies. I found this recipe on Tasty. I think they had it on Facebook or something. And I've edited it a little bit. I've taken out the espresso powder because my husband Andrew does not like it with coffee in there. And I also don't put in the like dark chocolate chips that it says to. But I
just use like regular milk chocolate chips?
I just use the normal semi-sweet chocolate morsels and whatnot. And I have my, recommendations for how to brown butter on there as well. So, but they're absolutely delicious. They're not super, super sweet. They tend to be more on the salty side, which I really like because I use salted butter versus unsalted butter, as well as you're adding salt to the batter. But it's
Do you sprinkle
really
salt
good.
on top?
I do not. I
I have a friend. Okay, I was going to say, I have a friend who's made her own chocolate chip cookie recipe, and she sprinkles the teeniest bit of flaky salt on the top of the cookies. I can't even begin to explain how good it is.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think like sprinkling salt on cookies, but it's so good.
I think if I didn't use salted butter, I would probably try that. But I think it would just be too salty at that point if I added it on top.
Yeah.
I always use salted butter when I bake, even though the recipe tells you to use unsalted.
Me too.
I don't know. I always use salted.
So do I. And Austin gets so mad at me for using salted butter for everything. He hates it.
How does he even know? I don't
That's
think you
what
can
we buy.
Okay, because I'm like, I don't think you can tell the difference in the flavor.
In certain ones you can, but this chocolate chip cookie recipe, you can definitely tell the difference because there's definitely more salt than normal.
Mm-hmm.
If you would like a copy of the recipe, you can send us an email to bestfamilyontheblock@gmail.com and we can send it to you.
And
It's
I'll
a pretty
link
simple recipe.
I'll link the original recipe in our description.
There you go. Loran, what is...
My recommendation for the week is from Netflix. Again, all I've been doing is watching shows. And I've been watching Cursed, which came out not too long ago. And I know, Mom, you started it too.
Yeah.
Did you finish it?
No, I think I'm on episode 8. I just finished episode 8.
I'm still on episode 7. We were out all day today. But it has Catherine Langford, who's the main character, and she's from Love, Simon and 13 Reasons Why. And it's a very, very much sci-fi, fantasy, magic show. So if you're not into fantasy...
It's got Merlin and Arthur.
Yeah, it's like an alternate story on Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Yeah.
And the famous sword, and in this show the sword has special powers, and it's actually kind of really interesting. If you liked I thought it was kind of like Game of Thrones in the sense that they're all fighting for
like
the
a bunch
throne.
of different people are fighting for the same throne,
right?
And whoever wields the sword is supposed to be who rules the kingdom.
Right. But Dad said it to him, it seems more like Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Because it has like the magic people and the fairies and...
Well, and the sword kind of affects your personality.
Yeah, it kind of changes
you and affects who you are. And so in that sense, it's kind of like the ring. And I see a lot more of Lord of the Rings than Game of Thrones for sure.
So if you like those type of shows or movies or whatever, it is a really good show. I've been enjoying it. So that's a good recommendation. My recommendation is, I am so excited. Big Brother is coming back on the air August 5th. Big Brother season 22.
Oh my God. So excited.
And this season is going to be all stars. They have there's already been several names that have already been leaked that are supposed to be on it. So I'm really excited to see who all is going to be a part of it. So be prepared. There will be lots of podcast episodes where we recap and talk about what happened on the show. I know a lot of people that are as fanatic about this show as we are. So I'm looking forward to seeing who all is going to be on it.
I know, I'm so excited. I didn't think it was going to happen because it didn't happen in July is when it normally starts, right?
Yeah, it usually starts early July.
And we were all afraid that it just wasn't going to happen this year because I think most other Big Brother shows that happen in other countries did get canceled. Like I know BB Canada got canceled.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our Big Brother, they're able to make it work. I was reading an article about it. So what they're doing is all the cast members have been sequestered in California right now. So they're quarantining, I guess, for the mandatory 14 days or whatever it is. And then production, they are going to be living in trailers on the set, and they're going to rotate out. So while they're on set filming, they'll work 14 days straight. And then other crew will quarantine for 14 days, and then they'll swap out.
That's some dedication.
Well, and it's also to keep the crew safe. Healthy. Because obviously once the cast members are in the house, they'll be fine because
they do come into contact with production sometimes though.
Right, but they don't come into contact with anybody else outside of production.
Because I believe they interview them in the diary room. I don't know if they necessarily see them, but they definitely hear.
But I think it's not that they're worried about the cast coming into contact with production.
Right. It's other production crew coming in and out. Right.
Exactly. So, because the majority of the camera is
remote controlled.
Right. Yeah. So today we brought Gina Moretto on as our guest to talk about what it's like to raise a child who has autism and just kind of, put it out there for those that have children with autism, just to kind of let her share from her perspective. Mm-hmm. And these are all just her, this is her personal experience with having a child with autism. She's not a doctor.
None of us are.
Yeah, none of us are.
It's also like how she chose to raise her child.
Yeah, from a mom's perspective.
Right.
What she is. So we're going to kind of do this in like an interview style format. We'll ask questions and Gina can answer.
Really quick, Gina, do you want to tell us a little bit about your family dynamic? Like just who's in your family and what
that looks like?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm the mom. My husband, and we have a daughter, Mariana, who is 10, and Yusuf is my son, and he is 6. So we have just the 4 of us, and there's an interesting dynamic with him being the youngest, and so that there's that dynamic of parenting the youngest. So right. That plays into it too.
Mm-hmm. And Yusuf, her younger son, is the one who has autism.
Right. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Although Mariana is questionable. She may be on the spectrum.
Thing is, from what I've read, again, not an expert here, always fact check, look up your own things, form your own opinions, do your own research. Ask your doctor. Girls tend to get diagnosed with autism much later on in life. Like 15 tends to be really early for them. So a lot of women get diagnosed as like adults. So Correct. That's another thing to kind of think on is a lot of kids who are diagnosed with autism as children, they tend to be more males because the studies done early on were all done from the male perspective.
Why? I wonder why that is.
I think it's easier to detect in males.
Yep.
Yes. I think it has to do with their developmental.
Women tend to be better at it's called masking. Mm-hmm. They tend to be better at like trying to pretending to act normal, quote unquote normal, than males do, I feel. Is again, not a doctor, do your own research.
Would you say that that's your
what I've heard
experience?
Also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what signs did you see in Yusuf, I guess from the time that he was born, that made you start suspecting that something might be different?
Mm-hmm. So I will say that it's a lot of hindsight that I noticed it. I knew something was wrong, but he was such an intense baby that I didn't really take the time to like put it all together. But
What do you
looking
mean
back
by
on
intense?
and these are some signs also of autism,
Okay.
but he cried all the time. He did not sleep. I mean, he slept obviously, but not, very limited. Babies are supposed to sleep all day, and it was like half that.
So I actually used to babysit Mariana and Yusuf often, especially when Yusuf was very, very young, from the time before he was born to almost now. And I remember like the process that we would have to go through to get Yusuf to go to sleep or fall asleep was very, very, very involved.
Right. And you had to do it a certain way, which again is a sign of autism a lot of times. So then as he got older, there was limited eye contact. He didn't seek out interaction, which most children do. They want to have that face to face. They want to see your reaction, that kind of thing. He didn't do that. He didn't respond to his name. And then, as you guys know, as he got older.
Like at what age? Like, did you notice that he wasn't really responding to his name?
About a year and a half. And Waleed, my husband, thought that he had hearing issues. And so, we went and got him tested and he was fine. And I always told him that, when he always wanted to go outside. And so it's like, I said, he can hear fine because when I open that back door, he comes running. Like, I know he can hear. So,
he also never really liked to be held. He didn't like to be like hugged. He didn't.
Right. And he didn't like blankets on him. That kind of thing. So yeah.
I remember when he would get upset, he did not want to be comforted like a normal baby would be comforted.
Right. But I learned later that holding his shoulders really firmly is what calmed him down. So, learning, I mean, this is with all children, but learning what works.
Did you ever read about, what's her name? Is her name Temple Grandin, Mary Temple Grandin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when I was in high school, I had to watch a movie about her, and she used like a cattle machine to give herself this pressured hug because that intense pressure just like calmed everything in her, which is why a lot of children that have autism also really like weighted blankets because it's that pressure.
He did not like that. No, which is, that was really, I was like, oh, we've got this.
And I mean, autism presents itself differently in everyone. No one is the same.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So
what other?
So then when he got older, he would line things up. Everything would be lined up, namely in rainbow order. It had to be that way. Repetitive behaviors. He still does this, but pacing, spinning. He did a lot of spinning. And then delayed language. So he didn't really talk until he got into speech therapy at about 2.
So at what point did you take him to be tested for autism to like where he was officially diagnosed?
Right. So he was a little before he turned 2, and we took him to daycare, and the director called me in and said, we're really not supposed to say anything, but we know you very well, and we think you might want to get him tested for autism, because whenever he'd come in, he'd go outside and he'd walk the perimeter, and he'd walk it like 3 times. And then he's just very repetitive, behavior. Yeah, exactly. And so, I then at that moment, I think when she said that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I put everything together. So he was 3. No, I'm sorry. He was 2. And he wasn't diagnosed until he was 3 because they don't usually diagnose until they're a little bit older. But he did get speech and occupational therapy. So that kind of helped the process start, Yeah.
So tell us about the kind of therapy that you chose and why you decided to go with this type of therapy.
So we did ABA, which is applied behavior analysis, and most people have not heard of this, but it's a scientific approach that focuses on behavior. And basically they use techniques to increase the positive behaviors and decrease the negative. So it's very strict. It's very rigid. I mean, you guys, you've been on this process with me, but just really praising the positives, and a lot of times literally just ignoring the negative. And not giving it any attention.
Which is really hard to do.
Especially when your child is flailing at you and kicking you and throwing things at you. But Yeah. So that we chose ABA. There's been some talk about it and how it's not great for the kids, how it kind of tries to normalize them. But my experience was, it helped them immensely.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it at all. Again, everyone has their own choice, and there's other therapies you can choose, but that
So
worked.
what do most people choose as far as therapy for children
What's
with
like
autism?
the normal route?
I would say ABA.
Okay.
I think that's the majority of people choose ABA. Yeah.
Really?
And then I know a lot of people, some children don't need the therapy because it's not as severe. And I know a lot of people don't like using the word on the spectrum, right? Like there's or more so they don't like using the words high functioning or low functioning, right? My child just has autism.
Right.
Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
And so,
it's actually, they have a wheel of, it's not linear. They have a wheel. And so the challenges are language, sensory, motor skills, perception, and executive function. So most of the autistic kids, they're heavy in one, like, Yusuf has great language, but his executive function is not great.
What is executive function?
It's self-regulation, focusing attention, multitask.
would that be like impulse control?
Yeah, impulse
that
control.
kind of stuff? Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that's where his struggle is.
So did you have to attend any like sessions to learn the technique on how to manage it at home?
Good question. Yes, we did. We had 2 hours a month that we went, and the therapist helped us, walked us through some of the techniques that they use in clinic. We'd go to the grocery store or Target or places where he struggled. Yusuf, his main issue, and again, autism is, it's a spectrum. It's not, and so he had a lot of behavioral issues. And so, again, the hitting, the kicking, the throwing, the flopping, the eloping, running off. So it was really helpful for them to teach us going to the grocery store and things like that, so we can, live a fairly normal life.
Yeah. Well, then I think that also prepares him for going to school and being with a teacher all day and going through that kind of emotion.
And you also chose a non-traditional method of schooling for him, for preschool
right,
and kindergarten, right? Because he did like a split method with kindergarten.
Yeah. Well, we continued the therapy is what we did. So he went to gen ed for kindergarten, and then in the afternoons he would go to the same ABA therapy. So he continued that, so that if there were any behaviors that they had to work on, like sitting still and things like that, then they could work on that.
So his preschool was basically therapy all day long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he didn't go to like a traditional preschool.
No.
He went.
Okay. I mean, he did for a minute before he was diagnosed.
Right. But I'm saying like once he was diagnosed. Mm-hmm. So when he was in preschool and he was in the therapy, do they do preschool like a traditional preschool where there's other kids, or is it all one-on-one? Like, how does it?
It was all one-on-one where he went.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that is the key, is the one-on-one. They did have, they would take other autistic kids that were kind of on the same level as him, and as they got older, like around 4 and definitely the year of him being 5, they would do kind of like mock classroom so that they could kind of get the idea of what it would be like in kindergarten. So
how did he adjust going to kindergarten into a general,
It was a challenge. He cannot sit still for that long. And also he's recently been diagnosed with ADHD. So there's that aspect of it. Not all autistic kids, struggle
Everyone's
with.
Different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so Yusuf's challenge is definitely a lot of the ADHD. He struggled because it wasn't the one-on-one, and he kind of had to, kind of self-motivate, and, it wasn't like all on him. And so, and that's,
the teacher wasn't with him the whole time telling him, okay, now do this. Okay, now do this. Like, this is the next step. And
she wasn't, I don't think she was the best fit for him. I think there might have been other teachers that were a better fit, but, kind of made it through. And just
how did he do socially? Because I know sometimes kids that have autism struggle with the social aspect of school and developing friendships and learning how to play well with others. The therapy did work with him and Mariana, so they kind of tried to get that, how he
he could learn how to play with peers. He has lots of friends if you ask him, but it's not really reciprocal. And it's really hard because he's so social, and he's very intense, and not everybody, doesn't work for everybody.
So do you think that he's going to end up like having issues with social cues like a lot of adults with autism?
Yes. And we have him, actually, it sounds odd, but we have him in speech therapy for those kind of things, actually. Reading body language, social cues, how to hold a conversation, that's been a struggle.
Eye contact.
Yeah, eye contact. His eye contact is decent, but he has to say
every time you walk into the house, especially like us, he's like, Miss Lorraine, and he like yells and he wants a big hug, and he's so sweet.
Yeah.
So what grade is he going into this year?
He's going into first grade.
Okay. And how or what does your school do anything for him? I know some schools, I'm a teacher, as you know, and some schools do provide in-class support. Some don't. Some provide different things. So is there anything that your school does to help him?
Well, he doesn't qualify for SPED because he's too intellectually
which is ridiculous.
Advanced. I know. So he's not in SPED, so he does not
get. For those that don't know, what is SPED?
Sorry, it's special ed. Basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Does it stand for something, Lorianne? I don't know if it's an acronym, but
I think it's
just special education.
Yeah, okay, so it's special ed, and everybody just abbreviates and calls it SPED.
Okay.
Because we're all lazy.
And I think special ed sometimes has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
It does. I remember being in school and always, especially in like elementary school, I'd always kind of be afraid of those kids because they were a lot different than us, and I didn't understand why they were there.
Well, I also think, and every school district's different, but I've talked to Gina about this. So in her school district, I don't teach in the district that she's in. They have one class for special education students, and those are the students who are really handicapped and disabled. They need that 24-hour support and help throughout the entire day. They need that assistance. In my district, it looks a little bit different. Yes, we have that class for those kids, but we also have separate classes, part of the general ed population, where paraprofessionals will go in for however their allotted time, whatever their allotted time is, and they'll go assist them for certain subjects. Or if they need help walking in the hallway, they'll always have a friend, an adult friend, walking with them in the hallway or something like that. And so every district's different.
But again, Yusuf, well, I don't know how your district does it, but would he qualify for SPED? Like, I don't know if that district has a different,
I don't know. I've never taught SPED, so I'm not a special ed expert.
Right.
Well, and it's unfortunate. And again, I'm not an expert, right? So we're just talking and voicing our opinions. But to me, it seems unfortunate that a school in today's world does not recognize that social deficiencies and behavioral deficiencies qualify as, things that can cause you to be delayed in your growth.
It's not all about academics.
It's not all about academics. And so the fact that they don't provide, because a kid like Yusuf, who now also has ADHD, to expect him to sit and stay focused for an entire day in a normal classroom and take tests and stay focused without to me, that's unreasonable.
I mean, to be completely honest, to expect any child to of sit like that is kind of,
Yeah. We had a 504 plan, but, and some of them were, the list on there was he can take frequent breaks.
What is a 504 plan?
It's basically, it's a plan for the kids who aren't in SPED that still need assistance. So, I mean, that is a tool that they do offer, which is great. The problem that I found is the implementation of it. And I don't feel that the teacher was able or chose to, I don't know, but to implement those, because I think that, the breaks or the sitting on a bouncy ball, those kind of things would help Yusuf. But it wasn't, it was implemented enough to cover the bases.
Mhm.
Like, oh yeah, we
I
can.
hate to say this, but like, could you have provided a ball for him to sit on?
I
Or-
offered, and
okay.
she said it would be too distracting. So, and I get that, I understand that, but
Yeah.
so it's hard. I mean,
Because
it's
sometimes,
hard.
I mean, unfortunately, you're going to have teachers that don't have experience in they have a set way of how they run the classroom, and to deviate from that for anything just throws them off,
right.
and they can't handle it at all.
Right. And I think, I got the impression that she thought that maybe he was just a behavioral issue. It's like, just, kind of, whip him into shape. She's always asking me like, well, how do you handle him at home and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, anyways, I felt like she didn't really understand autism maybe.
Right.
And she sees Yusuf and she's like, well, he's so intelligent. And
Well, because honestly, for somebody who doesn't know Yusuf like you do, and hasn't seen him at his most autistic self,
right.
wouldn't know. I mean, I remember for the longest time, I was like, but he seems so normal, which, because I didn't understand.
I mean, there were quirky things that he would do, like he would line everything up, and there was a specific way that he would play that wasn't necessarily the same as Mariano or other kids, but he was always, I mean, we never saw the flailing and the screaming and the freakouts like you did because you were with him all the time.
Right.
And so for an outsider,
Mm-hmm.
it's not always as prevalent as some people think, but it makes me so sad as a teacher that it sounded like the teacher just wasn't willing to disrupt her idea of what her classroom should look like to help a student.
Right.
In my class, like I tell the kids all the time, hey, if you need to stand up and push in your chair and stand behind your desk and bounce on your toes, because I have a lot of students that have ADD or ADHD, they need that stimulation. They need to move. And if they don't, that's when the behavior problems set in. And
right.
So I tell my kids all the time, stand up, go take a lap, go walk around the hall one time, come back, and we'll get back to work. And regardless if they have a 504 plan or not, if I see that a student is struggling and needs something, I try my best to give it to them, regardless of what I think my classroom should look like.
And we have a friend who's a teacher, and she actually taught her kids, and she teaches an older grade, but she taught her kids how to crochet or knit.
Her ADHD kids.
Her ADHD kids, because then they could do what they needed, with their hands were moving. So they were able to focus with their mind on the lesson or whatever it was that she was doing in the class, but they still got that hyperness.
And I've noticed that with Yusuf. It's like he has to be doing something to actually listen, which, usually you're like, put that down,
and pay attention.
But that's how
they have to multitask in order to be able to focus.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that, that's something that I learned through this kindergarten experience.
So what is your plan going forward with first grade?
So we have decided to put him in a private school that offers ABA therapy, and currently we're waiting on the insurance, so we're praying on that, but it's going to come through. So he will be in the ABA program, and then they kind of transition him into the gen ed with a shadow or with a para. Yeah.
So insurance can help with that.
Yeah. They pay for
awesome.
whenever that ABA therapist is with him.
That is nice.
Yeah. So you have to pay tuition, but it's limited,
So how, kind of transferring into the next question, how does remote learning play into that? Now I cannot imagine a lot of the special ed kids that we've had in the past, or just like in general, kids who need assistance in class, being home for as long as they have and not having the support that they're used to, not having that routine, that structure. What are you doing to kind of combat that? And or is therapy still happening? Like, what does this year look like if you're at home?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to figure it out, but I think that,
well, what did you do? What did you do when the kids were doing, quote, distance learning?
Did you drank a lot of, you call it chocolate milk.
Yeah, we
Code for wine.
yes, adult chocolate milk.
Yeah.
We did not do well with that. I think all of us were struggling and adjusting. But learning from that, I think, they're going to have a better way of doing things this time. So, I think what I would do is take it in small chunks, because you cannot sit still for long. So we do math, and then we get up and we have a break. We do, science, we get up and get a break. I don't know what it's going to look like as far as, how long the teacher is going to be teaching or how long he's expected to sit, but, we'll work with that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've kind of heard certain school districts are doing like regular school, but just through the computer. And so they're kind of expected to sit for like 8 hours a day and just do that. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out for a lot of kids and teachers and parents.
Yeah, we're all adjusting, I think, in different ways.
This is going to be an interesting journey.
And I plead the fifth during this conversation. I'm not.
Well, and I know that, when COVID first came on the scene, and they, in Texas, we started seeing the effects of it right after spring break. And so the kids went on spring break and then never came back to school. And, for a lot of kids, especially younger ones, they didn't understand it. Like, wait, what do you mean I'm not going to get to go back to my class and say goodbye to my teacher or any of that stuff? And most of the school districts kind of took that time period from March to the end of the school year and just wrote it off as a wash. Kids were not really graded or, really expected to do a full, what they would normally do.
It depends on where they were.
Definitely depends on the school district.
For my district, we expected a lot of the kids while we were gone. We had grades in every subject, and we had lessons. And
the thing that I know is, like, talking to parents, especially parents that had like teenagers and middle school kids, like, they were doing their quote schoolwork with the books open.
There's no way to escape
so
that.
They were giving them, they were getting A's and everything. So how are you really learning?
You are learning by being able to have that open in front of you. Real life, you're not expected to memorize things right off the bat and then take a test on it. To really truly learn, you should be able to have that opportunity to retake your tests and to really grasp the material like that.
That's true. Yeah.
I have my own opinions on how schools are run in general, so I'll just keep it to that.
So what have they been doing for Yusuf as far as his therapy goes with COVID? And like, is he still able to go to therapy? Do you have to do it remotely? Like, how is that working?
So we have been doing it remotely. Speech has started back live, which is, that's always fun, keeping the mask on and all this.
You do speech therapy with a mask on.
Thankfully, he doesn't need articulation. It's just, the social aspect. But again, he can't read the facial cues, which is really interesting. So they've been working on some other things. So it's hard for him, again, to sit for the Zoom and, long periods of time. So the therapists know to give him breaks and, they do the best that they can.
Especially, I can't imagine being at home with all of my things surrounding me. I'm like, oh, I really want to go play with that toy over there. Or Mariana's doing this in the kitchen, or like whatever. It's distracting. It's not that normal setting that he's used to. And I can't imagine. Me as a teacher doing it at home in March, I was like going crazy because I was like, okay, I have to sit in front of the computer at this time. Oh, but I could be doing this right now. But I had to
be sleeping.
It was really hard. It was really hard.
Yeah.
Well, because the distractions are probably now. Is he at least getting the same therapists that he had when he was going in person?
Yes.
So at least there's that familiarity with those people, and
and
he's
they know
comfortable
him
with them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is helpful, definitely.
So how has, I know he was diagnosed at a relatively young age. He was diagnosed at 3, kind of 2-ish.
Yeah, 3.
How did that affect your family dynamic with your older daughter and your husband, or even with extended family as well? Your in-laws, his cousins, aunts, uncles, like how did that affect your family lifestyle?
I mean, to start with, the place we chose for therapy was about 25 minutes away. So there was a lot of driving. Waleed, my husband, was traveling probably, 60% of the time. So that all fell on me, and that's fine. But, I also had Mariana. And so it was survival mode. Honestly, it was survival mode until he went to kindergarten, because it was just the back and forth and the, all the work it took to get in, with all doing the therapy and stuff.
Keeping it consistent.
Right.
Was Waleed and his family accepting of the fact that he had autism, or did they try to downplay it, like maybe it's in your head and it's not?
Yeah. Waleed, I think, wasn't around him as much as I was, so he thought, I think at the beginning it was like, spank it out of him kind of thing. And then obviously he's
yeah.
okay,
well, he knows,
well, I forget. Yeah. My in-laws did not think I don't think they really, I think what they think of autism is sitting in a corner, rocking, nonverbal. So they're like, Yusuf, this is not Yusuf. He doesn't have autism. Yeah. So they weren't, they weren't supportive as far as somebody that I would go to be able to talk to or anything like that. It was kind of like, informing them of what we were doing, and, hey, when we come over, this is how it's going to look, because we have to continue therapy wherever we are. They kind of came around more as he got older, but they still aren't on board fully.
Well, and I think part of that too is that generation.
Yeah.
Back, because even when we were kids, I'm 50, and I remember being, when I was a kid, never heard of the word autism. And if kids exhibited the type of behavior that Yusuf exhibits, they were just called hyperactive. You just need to take sugar out of their diet, or
I would even say, like, when I was a kid growing up in school, if you had autism, it was debilitating autism.
Right.
Like kids who are completely nonverbal, do not communicate. They have the
the stimming.
That's what, when I think of autism when I was growing up, that's the picture that was depicted to me. Not someone who can function in society, who can be social and communicate and interact with others and be a quote unquote kind of normal kid.
And that was always considered Asperger's syndrome, which was kind of different at that time.
Yeah.
Which no longer is a thing.
Yeah. I remember when you were first looking and discovering that maybe he did have autism, and it was your friend in California that kind of opened your eyes to it. And I remember thinking, no, he doesn't have autism. He's such a good little boy, and he's so sweet, and he's all that, all these wonderful things.
Well, I think the other thing that you didn't think so is because a lot of the things that you saw him do, I did a lot as a child as well.
Right. Yes. I remember having many conversations with Gina, and she would say, well, yeah, because Yusuf does this. And I'm like, well, Morgan used to do that. And she'd say, well, yeah, and Yusuf likes to do this. I'm like, oh, Morgan used to do that. And then I was like, oh, wait, was Morgan autistic? And we just never got her diagnosed.
But see, I think Mariana is a lot like Morgan, because, kind of some of the things I've told you, oh, Mariana does, and you're like, oh, Morgan did that, so just, quirky. And
well, I mean, if you look at it at the grand scheme of things, to one degree or another, we are all on the spectrum.
Absolutely.
If I really were to examine different things about myself, I would be like, so you didn't have to agree so quickly. But I mean, it's true. So it was kind of funny when you would talk about different things that Yusuf was doing, and I'd be like, well, Morgan used to do that. And then we told Morgan, and she's like, oh. So how does it work in your family with disciplining them, as far as like Mariana and Yusuf? Obviously, Mariana doesn't struggle with the same behavioral type of things that you have to deal with Yusuf. So what is your method, I guess, of how you discipline?
Or I guess also, like, does Yusuf notice that I don't know if you, like, how you reprimand or how you discipline, does he have that ability yet to notice that, wow, okay, I do a lot more things than Mariana does? Or does Mariana notice that she is, oh, well, Yusuf does a lot. He's like, I don't know, like, right. Do they notice that?
Right. I think Mariana does, but Yusuf doesn't.
I mean, I don't know if Yusuf's quite at the age to where he can realize that.
Yeah, or if he ever will. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because as Mariana gets older and into her tweens, I'm starting to use the ABA techniques with her that I still use with Yusuf, but not to that degree because, you know, she's throwing a fit or she's suddenly really emotional. You know, it's like I've been using this.
Hello, female hormones.
I am scared out of my mind. I will come to Paula again for more guidance on that.
And I will say, well, Morgan used to do that.
Yeah, maybe we'll save that for an episode when Mario's going
invest in Monster.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Invest in what Monster, ibuprofen, and chocolate.
Ibuprofen and chocolate. That was my cure-all.
Trifecta.
So, yeah. But I think Yusuf has just been more disciplined. You know, it's so bad, but I would always say, oh, Mariana, you know, you're the good child because her birth, her baby stage, like she's just easy.
She was such a good baby.
Oh, she's so easy. She slept. You know, perfect. And I know obviously that changes and, you know.
Well, and I always called that, you know, second child syndrome because Loran was such a good baby and she slept and she was very easygoing and then Morgan was from the time that she was born.
I do want to point out one thing, make things a little bit clear. I was not a bad kid.
No.
I was just more difficult than Loran.
Okay,
I did not act out.
And I wouldn't even
say
say you were difficult in the sense of like what the traditional thing that people think of as being a difficult child. You were very strong-willed.
Yes. And that can be difficult to learn how to parent.
If you don't know how to admire that.
Yes.
The reality is being strong-willed is a very good trait and it's a very good thing. And as a parent, you just have to learn how to channel that strong-willed personality into the positive rather than the negative.
I think it's also hard for parents, especially when it's their second child that's like that, because you haven't had to parent that way before.
Right. So
if you had a more strong-willed child first, and then your second child was easygoing, it would be the complete opposite, right? You'd be like, oh my gosh, this is a dream. It's
yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there so that people didn't get the wrong idea before when we said that I was a difficult kid.
No, you were not difficult.
Right.
You just, which I actually admired. She was very vocal in the things that she liked and didn't like. And, you know, did like or didn't like. And I think that that's a very admirable thing in a child to be able to speak up and say, no, I don't like this. Or, you know, no, I won't do that. I think that that's
how we knew she would never like fall under peer pressure.
No,
or
I never had to worry about her being peer pressured into doing anything in school because if she didn't want to do it, there was no way you could make her do it. And so, yes, it did require a little bit more creativity in parenting her. But yes, you're right, Morgan. You were not a difficult child. You were different.
Like with me as a kid, you could look at me a certain way and I would burst into tears.
Yes,
You
I still can look at you
and do it. Whereas Morgan took that as a challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember one time,
and she was like, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. One time when Morgan was 2, I had to spank her for something. I don't even remember what it was. And when I spanked her, literally, she turned around and looked at me and said, "That didn't hurt." And I was in my head, you know, like in the cartoons, the flames coming out the top of my head,
steam out of your ears.
Yes, and I was like, ugh. So I was like, oh, you know, and of course I had to like put her, you know, because you don't want to hit a child in anger. And so I just had to walk away.
But it's funny with I love the stories about Morgan. What, you know, you're like, I could put her in a room with no toys and she'd play with her fingers.
Yes.
You know, it's like,
she was really hard to punish.
Yeah. How do you discipline that?
I had to make her sit on her hands. Yeah. That was the only thing that would work. And even then her mind would, you know, anyway, enough about them. So what does your everyday kind of life look like having, you know, Mariana, Yusuf, a husband who travels a lot, and now all 4 of you are stuck in a house quarantining. And
so
oddly enough, they are all still alive.
Well, yeah.
For now, today.
For now.
I'm on medication. So I'm not going to talk about what it looks like in quarantine because I feel like that's not normal. And,
Right.
and there's a lot, there's like a lot of screen time. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
Just letting things go.
Right. I'm not going to fight with you on this. Go watch TV.
But normally it's basically just keeping on top of Yusuf. I know him so well, so I can, I can see the antecedent. I can see, okay, he's starting to, or he gets hangry. So I'm like, ooh, he's starting to kind of lose it. I think he might be hungry. So
I was gonna say, can you kind of see the blow-ups before they happen, and then that way work preventatively instead of reacting to whatever he's doing?
That's ideal. Yes, ideally I do that. It's just always changing, and depending on his mood, he's very emotional and he's very moody, like I used to be. So
is he sensitive?
He is sensitive. Yes. Definitely. I know. And it's so sweet. And again, when he gets older, it's going to be incredible. And if he gets married or if he has a significant other, it's going to be great. But he's got to channel that.
Whoever he ends up with is going to know that they are cherished.
Oh my gosh.
Because he definitely is a lover. He just,
When he loves you, he loves hard.
Yeah,
he does.
So for those of you who are listening, that was at Loran's wedding, Yusuf and Mariana were the hit of the wedding. They were the ones who danced the night away and were the stars of the show. they were
stole that dance floor and they rocked.
Mariana broke out breakdancing on the floor. It was amazing.
Listen, I admire that.
There was a dance circle
around them.
Mariana.
I came out of the bathroom. I said, "What's going on in here?" Oh, it's my child. on her back, like going around.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. She was.
So they do have a lot of personality, both my children. Yes, indeed.
So, what was your initial reaction when you found out that he was diagnosed with autism?
Honestly, relief, because I thought, okay,
there's an answer.
Yeah, there's an answer. We can get help for this. We can, we can kind of work on this. Because before I was just, hands thrown in the air. I don't know what to do with this kid. I have no guidance. I don't even know where to start. So it was definitely helpful to have that answer and to have a path of, a direction to go.
When your friend first kind of mentioned to you, like, maybe he has autism, was there a part of you that was like, no?
Yeah. Definitely. So, but she said it about Mariana, because Mariana used to play with Play-Doh. She used to have Play-Doh in her hand, and she's like, "Oh, that looks like that's a sensory thing." Yeah, exactly. And again, maybe Mariana is on the spectrum, but not like Yusuf is. So, so I kind of was like, yeah, she knows because her son has autism, but I mean.
And like we said, everyone has their own weird little quirks and tics and things, and.
Right. So I didn't really put a lot of stock into it. So yeah.
What did you struggle with the most as far as like learning he was autistic to going through therapy to handling now? Like what has been the biggest struggle?
The biggest struggle is when we started ABA therapy. And I was basically doing it alone because Wally was traveling so much. And, it was so bad. And they have a thing called an extinction burst. So basically when you start ABA and, you start putting these kind of boundaries on them, they have an extinction burst, which means like it gets even worse. So it's kind of, it gets worse before it gets better. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of extinction bursts and a lot of really, really bad behavior. Like the hitting increased, the eloping increased. And that was really hard because I was tired. I was by myself. I was in the grieving process.
Yeah. And I feel like also you've parented a certain way. He's 2 years old at this point. You've had 2 years of parenting him a certain way. And now you're having to relearn all of that and start over, essentially.
Right. And it was a lot of work. And I think that, you don't really know your child until, I didn't really know Yusuf until he was like 2 or 3. You kind of get to really know your children. And so it was kind of like learning him and his patterns and, kind of getting on top of it ahead of the meltdown. So yeah. But, I think I was grieving the whole thing and like, not having a neurotypical child. And then I'm driving to therapy and I'm on my own. And it was a lot.
And you were alone because Waleed was traveling so much for work.
Right.
So did you find yourself just melting down and having moments in the bathroom or
and Waleed, we joke about it, but there was a time when Yusuf was crying and screaming, and I was like, I can't do this. And I went to the bedroom and I just slammed the door, and it like went back and it made a hole in the wall. And Waleed came back and he's like, what happened? I was like, it was either the door or your son. Like, you're lucky it was the door, because it was just, So I mean, and I've learned how to handle my stress better, over the years. So
I will say I've watched you with Yusuf when he's having some of his meltdowns, and the way that you're able to maintain your calmness, and you speak very low and slowly and monotone, and it's just, and you repeat. It, and I'm assuming that's something that you learned through the ABA therapy, but it's very soothing. And the fact that you're able to maintain that through him flipping out,
like, it's taught you patience.
More
so than you ever could have known.
Girl, yes. I mean, if you ask anyone who knew me when I was younger, it's like, oh, she has no patience. And now it's like, I'm just overflowing with patience.
So do you find that you do the same thing to Mariana?
Yes.
Does it work with her?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
I feel like it kind of would work with any child, positive, positive reinforcement is always the best kind of, quote
and
unquote
also
discipline.
like when I noticed when you've handled him before, or when he's been having his freakouts, you stay there and you, whatever you expect him to do. I think at the time we can't every Thanksgiving and he was eating and there was something that happened and you sat there and you didn't get up and you didn't stop talking to him until he did what you asked. Whether he screamed, kicked, threw the food, whatever, you sat there and said, Yusuf, we are not done here until you do what I have asked you to do. And
but
very calmly, not talking to him sternly or meanly or yelling, just saying, these are my expectations. This is what you need to be doing right now. And this is how it's going to be done. And
with autistic kids, that works for them because they want to know the boundaries.
What's expected of them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, Yusuf's thing was always counting. And so, when he'd freak out, I'd say count to 10 and he'd be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm like, do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it would slow down. And then, so yeah. You just got to stick to it,
Heck, I count to 10 sometimes when I need to calm down.
What changes have you seen since starting his therapy?
I mean, he's a different child, as you guys know. I mean, the behavior is so much better. There's really no hitting or throwing or anything like that anymore. He's able to verbalize better what his needs are, what he's feeling.
Well, and even when he's upset, he's better at
handling it.
I was going to say, have you noticed he's been able to control his emotions and his impulse reactions and things? Has he been able to control himself better, like on his own?
Yes. Yeah. That's what he has been taught, is to, self-regulate. And that's come a long way. Although he still needs help,
Well, of course, he's only 6.
I know. Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's 6. Yeah.
He's
still a baby.
He's just a baby.
He's a little guy. But he's getting older, and it's kind of like, oh man, it's fun to see him, mature because it takes a while for boys, but yeah.
I'm still
What does Mariana, like, how does she feel about it? Like, does she know he has autism and or understand what that means? And how, like, have you noticed, does she play or act differently with him than she does with her friends?
She does know he has autism. We just say that, his brain works differently. We don't really get into detail, but so she knows that. I think she's defensive of him because, like, if he's kind of acting out, she's like, well, like, she'll explain it or whatever, or not making eye contact. If like there's a new person that comes in, or like one of her friends, and she's like, oh, he has autism. She plays with him like a sibling. Yeah. There's a lot of sometimes it's really, really great and she plays with him really well, and sometimes she doesn't. So
like a typical sibling.
Yeah, like a sibling, so yeah, it's but she helps him, when her friends come over, she tries to include him sometimes, not always, but so yeah, I think she kind of, but she's a big sister too. So I don't know how that plays into it, Yeah.
What how has having a child with autism and having a child that does not have autism, how has that changed you as a person, just in general, not necessarily as a parent, but just as a person? Like how has this journey changed you, affected you?
I mean, like we talked about, I have a lot more patience, a lot more compassion. I think, when I see kids out and, I'm like, my go-to is always, maybe they're on the spectrum, maybe they're having a meltdown, maybe they're having a sensory issue. I think this sounds weird, but I don't care as much what people think in a lot of ways, I'm parenting the way I'm parenting. I am who I am, and
you're doing the best you can.
Yeah.
With what you have.
And I learned a lot of grace for myself because, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing a pretty good job.
I think
that's awesome, especially like your perspective of other kids. I think so often people will, like, let's say you're at the park, for example, and you see a child having a meltdown. Your first reaction isn't, oh gosh, what is that parent doing? Why aren't they handling their child? Your first reaction is, well, maybe there's something else. Maybe the child has a problem with X, Y, and Z, and they're struggling with something. It's not always the parent's fault. I'm not saying it's the child's fault either, but your first reaction isn't to judge the parent. And I think in today's society, there's the mom shaming is ridiculous. Like, if you're on Instagram or Facebook and you're an influencer and you have a child, like, watching what people say and comment about the decisions that you make, it's your child. As long as they're fed, happy, and healthy, it does not matter how you parent the child because it's your child.
Yep. And you know them and you know what works for them.
Exactly.
And I've suffered a lot of judgment, and it's usually other moms, but
which is really unfortunate.
It is. It's really sad. But I also, there was one time at McDonald's and I don't know if her child was on the spectrum, but the kid was having like a major meltdown and she was handling it really well. And I went up to her and I said, you're doing a great job. Like this is hard, and I think that, and she's like, thank you so much. We don't hear that enough.
We don't. Yeah.
So being a parent in general is just, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, just with a neurotypical child. I mean, so yeah.
So what expectations or hope, like what do you hope for his future? What is your dream?
My biggest dream for him is that he finds friends. He finds his tribe. He, he finds people that get him because he's so social and he just loves playing and being with people and, and like right now he doesn't really have friends. So, I pray for that.
First and second grade is where that changes.
Yeah.
I've seen in my own personal classroom, I've seen second grade where kids really flourish as far as their relationships with others. And I think a lot of it has to do with the classroom placement. Placing kids together that will work well with one another and that have common things that they can be friends about. This can maybe sound bad, but birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we'll be on the playground sometimes and we're like, oh my gosh, I love that these two are friends. Like they need each other. And so I think by him going to a private school, I think his life is about to change for the better. I think
I agree.
In relationships,
and the other thing too about a private school is the pool is smaller.
Right.
So there's more chance of him being able to make friends because the pool is smaller.
Right. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not in a class of 25. You're in a class of maybe 15
or I really hope that he can be, a functioning member of society. He can,
I have no doubts in my mind that he will be a functioning member of society.
We just have to channel him.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to find, Yusuf, as you guys know, I mean, he's very complex. He likes Barbies, but he likes cars. And so finding where he fits is going to be key. And once he finds out, he's going to flourish, but and I mean, he's so quirky. I love him. He's gonna change the world, but we just got to channel it.
So what advice would you give to a mom out there who has a baby and or young child and they
maybe are just starting this process
and they're thinking, something is off, something is different. What would your advice be?
Get help. I mean, you know,
How?
ask for help, ask for, you know, like do your research. Find
Did you
other
start with
moms.
your pediatrician? Like, how did you?
My pediatrician, yeah, he's like, oh, he'll grow out of that. Oh, yeah, it's fine, you know. And
Well, I think
so
it's hard for pediatricians because they see them a few times a year.
Right.
It's
but you
not-
fill out the form,
I
you know, it's
know.
like you fill, and like at his 2-year-old one, I was like, oh yeah, he's delayed on that. Ooh, yeah, he's delayed on that. You know, you'd think that they would look at it and be like, well, yeah, maybe. I mean, it doesn't hurt to get him tested, you know.
So how did you know where to go?
The daycare gave me resources.
Okay.
And at that point, you know, he was only 2, so we got to ECI, which is early childhood intervention, and they gave us speech and occupational therapy, and that helped a lot to kind of get the ball rolling. And then when he could be diagnosed at about 3, then we got the diagnosis.
Mhm.
So what I'm sensing you're saying is you as a parent know your child better than anyone. And if you think something is off,
Yeah.
don't let your pediatrician
Mm-hmm.
or a parent
Or
or
your spouse,
a spouse
or yeah.
or a friend tell you that it's all in your head.
Right.
Don't stop until you get your child the help that they need.
Right. And I think that's another thing I've learned on this journey is trust your gut. You know,
Yeah.
you know your child and trust your gut. And I think, you know, there's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of people out there that, you know, want to share their story like I do, and to help people. And, you know, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Yusuf would be a very different child today if I hadn't gotten the therapy and I hadn't dug deep and I hadn't, you know, done what I had to do.
And the reward, I mean, this is going to pay off for you big time. The reward is going to be when he someday, you know, is self-sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
living on his own, able to manage living on his own and being a productive member of society.
Right.
That is all you can ask for
Yeah.
as a parent.
Yeah.
You know? And so if you can get him to that point, you've done your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, you know, he's going to be that quirky child or person, you know, he's going to be kind of that, you know, different person who has different, you know, interests than other people, but I don't care. You know,
but once
I mean, as long
once
as
you're an
he's-
adult, there's all kinds
Yeah.
of quirky people out there, you know? So
Mhm.
he'll find,
Yeah.
like you said, he'll find his flock.
Right.
He'll find his,
Especially in today's world where
yeah.
a lot of the stereotypes and the stigmas are falling, and so it's easier to be quirky and be yourself.
Yeah.
Right. It's more
That's
acceptable.
like the in thing right now is to be
Mhm.
weird.
Well,
Yeah.
then he was born in the right time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Well,
yeah.
we just want to thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey, and thank you for coming and joining us today. And we just want to say that wherever you're listening, we would love if you could like, follow, subscribe, or if you want to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify also. And if you have advice or questions or topic ideas or anything, please feel free to email us at bestfamilyontheblock@gmail.com. And we can't wait to see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Bye.